Hey everybody, it's TacticAngel here, and with the beta weekend for World of Warships coming up, I thought we would talk briefly about how not to just be terrible at this game. So, I'm going to go through a couple of real quick hits for those of you who are new to maybe think about. I know you're not going to listen to me, but think about this after you get totally wrecked. So number one, don't drive in straight lines. And when I mean don't drive in straight lines, I mean really just don't drive in straight lines. Number one step for increasing your survivability in this game is not to be steaming in one direction at the same speed and in exactly the same direction. What you need to do, particularly if you're in like a cruiser or a destroyer, is alter your course every now and again, alter your speed every now and again, because people will shoot torpedoes at you, and those torpedoes have a very predictable way of hitting your ship. And when they hit your ship, you die. Number two, have a buddy. When you went out and you learned how to swim, I hope you learned how to swim, but when you learned how to swim, they told you have a buddy, because that buddy was going to help you if you ever started to sink. Now in World of Warships, there's a lot of water, so it kind of feels like that analogy should work pretty well. But if you steam off in one direction and your entire team steams off in another direction, the sad fact is, even if you are the smartest person in the group, you're probably going to die, and you'd be a lot better off if you had followed at least one or two of the lemmings so that they could maybe shoot at the things that are going to be shooting at you. If you end up in a situation where you are fighting several enemies by yourself, you're probably going to die. And if you end up in a situation where the rock, paper, scissors of World of Warships, which is kind of the battleship, cruiser, destroyer mechanics, aren't working in your favor, you have a really, really good chance of dying, even if it's one-on-one. So, have a buddy. Don't wander off on your own. The third, and probably last, and maybe most important thing that you need to understand when you're playing World of Warships is that the side of your ship is not as well armored as basically any other part other than the back of it. If you are sailing broadside on, which is kind of one entire side of your ship facing directly at an enemy, understand that you are in a very vulnerable position. You can see the enemy turrets. If the enemy turrets are looking at you, there is a pretty good chance that you don't want to be facing them, unless maybe it's a battleship that just fired and he missed all of his shots. Or maybe it's a destroyer and you're pretty sure that the destroyer's guns aren't that dangerous to you. Understand, of course, that destroyers will shoot torpedoes at you, and if they shoot torpedoes at the broadside of your ship, your ship is a lot longer than it is wide. So remember what direction you're facing, and don't give yourself up to being shot to pieces if you can help it. Now we've talked about a couple things that are going to help keep you alive. The next thing we're going to talk about is how to shoot things. Now, if you are aiming in World of Warships, you will notice that there is a second indicator on the lower left and a distance indicator on the lower right when you zoom in to any particular target. Each one of the little pips is essentially telling you about how many seconds it's going to take for your shells to get there if your enemy is traveling at about 30 kilometers per hour. Now, for the sake of, thinking about it, 30 kilometers per hour is about as fast as your average cruiser. It is significantly slower than your average destroyer, which probably moves more at 40, 45 maybe. And it's usually faster than battleships. Most American battleships move at 20 kilometers per hour. So when you were sitting in class not paying attention to how to do, fractions and nonsense, saying you'd never need this, you did not think that you were going to play World of Warships on the console, because it helps to kind of figure out how many seconds it's going to take for this stuff to get there. I would tell you basically, if you want to do the shorthand, is if you're shooting at a cruiser and it looks like it's going as fast as possible and it's 3 seconds away, aim a little bit more than 3 seconds or 3 ticks away from where you want to hit the ship, and you'll probably do okay. But essentially that's almost all you need to know about gunnery. The other part of offense is going to be, how do you use torpedoes? Now, torpedoes are going to be on pretty much most of your cruisers and all your destroyers, and then every so often, particularly as we start to see Germans in the game, they're going to be on some battleships too. Not a lot, but there are a couple battleships that are going to have torpedoes. Now, aiming torpedoes is a thing that is actually helped quite a bit by the actual user interface. It helps to know how far your torpedoes go. Most torpedoes don't go more than 6 or 8 kilometers. And when you select your torpedoes, it's going to show you this little pie. And that pie is going to tell you, the spread of your torpedoes. It'll put 3, 4, 5, or really 2, 3, 4, or 5 torpedoes out in that one arc. If you toggle the arc, it can go from a wide spread to a very narrow spread. And I would suggest thinking about using the narrow spread when you're really, really confident that you want to hit somebody that's in that narrow spread, and using the wide spread when you're more medium range and you just want to kind of carpet the area with a whole bunch of roaming death. When you aim that torpedo spread, understand that the torpedo spread arc is kind of telling you where the front of the ship is if the ship is sailing forward. It's telling you where the back of the ship is if the ship is sailing backwards. So a lot of times, particularly if you think that your enemy is steaming ahead at full speed, you'll want to aim just a little bit behind, because if they start to turn, that'll slow them down. Or also, if they slow down, then your torpedoes still have a better chance of hitting. So that's what the torpedo thing is trying to tell you. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is how to select ammo. Now, if you are in a destroyer or if you are in a battleship, your choice is fairly easy, because if you're in a destroyer, you should almost always be shooting high explosive. High explosive has a chance of setting your enemy on fire, and you are probably going to do more damage causing fire damage over time than you are actually penetrating it. Now, there are some ships you can get through the side. I would say particularly Japanese cruisers, and to a certain degree at close range American destroyers or American cruisers, you can get through with armor penetration as long as you're getting real nice broadside shots into it. Other than that, high explosives all day. If you're in a battleship, it's completely the opposite. You want to pretty much be shooting armor penetration all day, because you want to score those big citadels. The armor penetration is going to completely wreck cruisers, and if you get a citadel hit on another battleship, then you are doing a really, really good job for your team. Now, the one time maybe you don't want to do that is if you are all by your lonesome and you're being stalked by a very brave destroyer that you can actually see. Your armor piercing is going to go straight through a destroyer every time in a battleship. If there's no chance you're going to need to shoot at anybody else within your reload time, then shooting at a destroyer with high explosives is probably going to be a little bit more effective than shooting armor penetration shots. That said, you're still at a really big disadvantage. You're probably going to get torpedoed to death. Now, if you're in a cruiser, you have your work cut out for you, because either answer can be right. and it really depends on what's going on. I think the shorthand is if you're shooting at a battleship or a cruiser from the front, then you definitely want to be using high explosives. If you're shooting at either one of those targets from behind, either one kind of works. You do have a pretty good chance of going through the armor of either one of those from behind. And if you're broadside, then you can probably get through with armor penetration. You might have to be really, really broadside to a battleship in order for that to work. So kind of, you're just going to have to feel it out. Each battleship and each cruiser is a little bit different, so there's no real big rule. Certainly setting people on fire and torpedoing them to death is a completely legitimate tactic in most cruisers. What do you do if you're shooting at a destroyer? Well, you shoot high explosives if you can. If you have something else loaded, you might as well shoot that. But high explosives, destroyer, you're going to wreck them pretty quick because they don't have enough armor to stop even those types of shells. Anyway, I hope you guys will join us for the World of Warships Legends closed beta. Hopefully you got in. If not this weekend, hopefully in the future you join us, and then we can all have just a merry old time on the sea. And hopefully I will destroy your ship many times, even though I've tried to help you here. Please feel free. If you have any questions, go ahead, ask them down in the comments. I will try to answer them as they come in. In any case, have a good one, guys. I will see you on the next one.